The sun set in an indignant blaze over the horizon, splattering the sky with hues of crimson and violet, shadows creeping into the corners of Hawthorne. An uncharacteristic chill suffused the air, even for late autumn. Trees, stripped naked by the seasonal winds, clawed at the sky like desperate fingers. It was a far cry from the mundane evenings that had suffused the small town. The atmosphere was thick with an oppressive dread that coiled around the hearts of its residents, whispering unsettling truths that none dared to acknowledge. Evelyn Darnell sat at her kitchen table, trembling fingers swirling a lukewarm cup of tea, the steam curling upward like a wraith. She peered through the rain-smeared window, her gaze lost amidst the murky silhouette of the woods. It had been 3 days since she last saw Thomas, her husband. 3 days since he went for his routine evening run into the woods. A harmless endeavor devolved into the stuff of nightmares. At first, worry had nagged at her like an itch. What could keep him out so late? He had always returned promptly, breathless and animated, sharing tales of the fading light or the scurrying critters that gathered in the gloaming. Evelyn tried to convince herself that he must have lost track of the time, wandering deeper into the embrace of the trees. She could almost hear his laughter echoing through the rustling leaves, but the sound was distant. These woods were alive in a way that unsettled her. Every rustle and creak beneath the weight of the overcast sky felt sentient. She hunched over her tea, mind wandering the labyrinth of worry. The local authorities had commenced their search, igniting a frenzy of whispers and speculation among the townsfolk. It was nothing but the usual banalities: lost hiker, natural causes. Yet, an unease had settled over Hawthorne, a sense that something was wrong beneath the pleasantly banal surface. An officer speaking amongst her neighbors mentioned reports of a peculiar light, that strange luminescence flickering around the edges of the woods like fractured glass. Evelyn shook her head, dismissing it as hallucinations spun by nervous minds. As her eyes roamed the expanse of the trees, a flicker caught her attention. A subtle glimmer shimmered between the trunks, briefly piercing the fog like a dagger. Curiosity hatched within her, mingled with dread. She had thought all there was to fear lay hollow within the darkness, but now a sliver of her attention drew her toward the woods. Holding her breath, she stepped outside into the charnel dusk. The air was charged with an indescribable energy, a hushed symphony of rustling leaves and distant murmurs laced with the scent of damp earth. As she wandered closer to the tree line, her heart thudded in her chest, an erratic counterpoint to the stillness of the woods. Shadows danced longer than they ought to, and in the electric silence, she caught sight of faint, undulating movements, like distant waves beneath the surface of a lake. Her breath quickened, pulse racing as spectral shapes began to swirl among the foliage. Even the moon avoided her gaze, casting a pale pallor, while branches writhed like serpents overhead. Evelyn was no stranger to darkness. It was the accompanying whispers that seized her breath. Rich, guttural tones glided through the air, not words, but something primordial, a frequency tugging at strings woven deep within her psyche. Chilled to her core, she stumbled back, the concrete floor beneath her feet cracking with the weight of something oppressive. Nightfall embraced Hawthorne silently, a vast shroud woven of silence and shadow. As she returned home, dread enveloping her whole, her mind swirled. The neighbors' whispers echoed through the umbra, drawing tendrils of fear through the fabric of her day-to-day life. She found herself aligning unlinked hours to each passing breath, waiting for the moment her husband would stride through the door, laughter dancing on his lips. Yet, as darkness encroached, that laughter grew distant. Sleep eluded her as the hours dragged by like a thickened fog, visions of her husband's face twisting into something grotesque, his features warping in the flickering candlelight. Her mind pooled with despair, a stagnant mire of hopelessness. How could anyone lose themselves in the woods after sundown? Wasn't her marriage built on sturdier foundations? The shadows crowded closer, weaving into her thoughts like a coiling snake, intertwining with her grasp on reality. Days turned into weeks as the search dragged on, bathed in the eerie glow of nightly vigils, flickering candles placed beside the too quiet streets of Hawthorne. Friends and relatives came and went, exchanging condolences that felt more like phantom embraces than genuine expressions of sympathy. Locals monitored the forest, their bravado transformed into cautious rituals undertaken with unease. It was no longer just a search, it had transformed into a vigil, and as the nights lengthened, collective whispers began to dance on the edges of reality, spurred by the ephemeral glow that flickered in the distance. Evelyn had begun to see shadows outside her window in the dead of night. Shapes that resembled her husband began to fester in her dreams, grotesque parodies of the man she loved. Desperation clenched her heart like a vice. Echoes of past conversations played in her mind, those hushed tales of cosmic terror shared in the dead of night, stories of beings that traversed the stars, watching from beyond the veil of human understanding. She scoffed at those tales, yet as darkness clawed at the edges of her sanity, a part of her began to wonder if perhaps those stories concealed a sliver of truth. A chilling current ran through her with each stroke of the clock. The very fabric of her thoughts began to fray, the ambiguity of her worries morphing into terrifying specters. Hallucinations crept in, and the spectral figures in her periphery whispered nameless promises that sent shivers skittering along her spine. Were they beckoning her, offering glimpses of a terror she could scarcely comprehend? The walls of her home constricted, closing in like an ever-tightening noose. It was on a night soaked in dread, that soft silvery glow returning to claim its place beneath her window, that she made her way back to the forest. Pulling herself free from the grip of terror, she set foot into the shadowed embrace, heart pounding, mind racing. Her breath hung in the cold air. The woods opened up around her, pulsating with radiant hues intermingled with the darkness. The trees loomed, their trunks gnarled and twisted, blurring into shapes familiar yet unsettling. It was a slow encroachment, her perception slipping further from her grasp, like a fugitive on the run. The ethereal light seemed to pulse with a sentience of its own, curling around her like fog. Fatigue clawed at her mind, straining her resolve, yet something deeper urged her onward, a magnetic pull, an insistent whisper that wove into her very being. Find him. The deeper she pushed into the sanctum of the woods, the further time unraveled. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The pervasive glow pulsated, guiding her through a labyrinth of gnarled trees that seemed to shift and twist at will. She stumbled upon a clearing, the air heavy and electric, clashing with her senses. Stars blinked above, a cosmic tapestry that felt both achingly familiar and profoundly alien. And there, at the center, thrummed a heart of unknown origin. Sprawled upon the earth was the shape of a figure, twisted yet bound in radiance. Darkness consumed her heart, for it bore Thomas's likeness, though features entwined with something grotesque. His mouth, wide and disproportionately long, contorted in soundless pleas. Stars flickered above, their brightness paradoxically shadowed by the terror of what lay before her. Something beyond the thresholds of her understanding lurked around the periphery. No fear of physical harm, rather, an uncanny dread that gripped her being. Wake him, the pulse of light whispered, a tender caress against her consciousness, sliding its way into the labyrinth of her thoughts. He is ours. Evelyn stumbled back, her world spinning with the implications. What lay before her twisted between monstrous form and the essence of the man she loved, warped by the malevolent energy of the woods. And as she comprehended the truth, her heart turned to stone, every fleeting shadow of familiarity dashed against the rocks of horror. What had they done to him? She clutched her temples, willing the absurdity away, but the grip tightened. Another voice crawled across her mind. There was no escape from it. Their whispered truths unsheathed a reality far harsher than earthly existence. Terror cascaded around her, constricting her senses, pulling the very fabric of her being toward that grotesque shape upon the ground. Join us, it seemed to promise, for the boundaries of existence are merely illusions. Evelyn fell to her knees, fingers clawing against the loamy floor. In the void, she felt tethered to something inconceivably vast, fragments of her reality bleeding into a cosmic tapestry threaded with terror. Time lost all semblance of coherence. Who was she? What was this reality? The curious whispers morphed into deafening roars, enveloped by a vortex of color fading into black. As her spirit trembled on the precipice between the known and the infinite, the darkened woods consumed her, and there, caught in the crosshairs of fragile human consciousness, her resolve crumbled beneath the weight of unspeakable truths. The figure twisted upright, through the shifting haze and veil of cosmic dread, an inviting glow, pulsating with the rhythm of another world, cradling her thoughts in a sinister embrace, begging her to comprehend. And as the night-wrought dawn threatened to rise from the edges of unimaginable horrors, Evelyn realized, with an icy chill slithering through her veins, that perhaps she would never truly grasp the nature of their reality. All that remained was the suffocating sense of unease, suffused with echoes of what Thomas had become, a veil torn away, allowing something else to crawl forth and claim a place between the stars. In Hawthorne, eyes would forever search the treetops for a flicker of familiar laughter, unaware of the truth that lay in wait within the woods, a cosmic dance of despair, the inescapable terror that hummed quietly beneath the surface, the pulsing heartbeat of the void. As the dawn threatened to bleed through, a nameless horror hovered on the fringes, nurturing the unanswerable quests of humanity while leaving pieces of its once vivid humanity scattered amongst the wilderness. Would they ever comprehend, or would they continue in blind ignorance, slipping deeper into the shadows of something unseen yet felt, echoing in the quiet of a world that now turned its gaze toward the stars?